Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a little bit of an update on my writing and how it's been going so far. If you haven't watched my first writing vlog, go and check it out. It kind of explains a lot about the book that I'm currently writing and kind of my journey and process on how I got where I am now in terms of writing. So if you're interested in that, go check it out and then you can come back here and I'm gonna pretty much give you an update based off that video. So the project that I'm currently working on, I have been calling The Art of Summoning Demons, and it is a YA/new adult novel. I'm not quite decided yet. Basically, I think the main difference for me is going to be whether I want to include sex in it or not, and for a lot of people it is sometimes the only difference between a YA and a new adult novel. But if we want to go based off the character's age, then it would be new adult because my main character is in college. She is in her first year of university, so I'd say that's probably new adult, and anything that's in high school is probably young adult. It is contemporary fantasy / urban fantasy / paranormal / supernatural. I'm really not certain what category, what genre it fits in anymore because it is really hard for me to decide based off comps and things like that. It seems to me like a lot of authors decide completely different things even though they sometimes have very similar books. So I'm just gonna go off what I think it is. I think it's contemporary fantasy. What do I mean by contemporary fantasy? Contemporary means that it is from our day and age, so it's written in the present time, it's not historical, it is not in the 80s or in the 1600s or whatever. It is present day and age, and it is in our world and universe as we know it. So it's not based off some fantastical imaginary world. It's not Lord of the Rings, etc. But fantasy also means that there are fantasy elements to it, so magic is included. However, some people will say that this is paranormal because paranormal is the type of fantasy that focuses more on certain types of creatures such as vampires, werewolves, etc. My book doesn't actually have vampires and werewolves, but it has demons and witches, which sometimes fall into the category of the paranormal genre. So it is between whatever you want to call it, contemporary fantasy or paranormal. Okay, so once again, if you want to know more about everything to do with the synopsis of my story, you can go check my other video where I talk about that. But just to summarize it very briefly, my main character is called Olive. She goes for her first year at university and she goes mainly because she wants to stay with her best friend, Fran. When she gets there, she goes to a sorority party to accompany her best friend who wants to become a sister in that sorority. And the morning after, she wakes up to find her roommate, who she had taken with her to that sorority party, dead in her bed. The door to the room remains closed and locked, the windows are locked, there's no traces or evidence that anyone came in and out of the room after murdering her roommate. So obviously Olive becomes a bit of a suspect, but she slowly realizes that this is not a normal crime and that it's very much involved into paranormal / supernatural stuff going on campus, aka covens of witches and demons. In terms of what inspires my story and what in general I am inspired by when I write this genre, for me it's very much Buffy and Netflix's Sabrina. So things like that really influenced my writing and the genre that I like to write in. So last time I talked to you guys, I actually was telling you that I wanted to rewrite the beginning of my story and start it in a completely different spot in the story because it just was not working. I didn't think that it was enticing enough, interesting enough for people to want to continue reading on after the first chapter. It was more of a slow burn, and I don't mind a slow burn personally, but I can understand that it's not really the most popular thing to do. Basically, it started off with Olive going to university, arriving in her bedroom, meeting her roommate Vanessa, deciding to go to that sorority party, then going to that party, and then finally, I think in chapter 3, she wakes up to find Vanessa dead. But I thought it would actually create more of a shock and interesting factor if I moved things a little bit forward and instead we find Olive at the very beginning in the first chapter in jail being interrogated by police officers because they think she's their number one suspect in the murder of Vanessa. So how am I doing now? So the last time I talked to you guys was actually the 25th of February, and I just wanted to check that date to see where we are now, and it is now the 29th of July. So that's March, April, May, June, and July. That's 5 months since I last talked about my book and writing in general. So it took me 5 months to write how many words exactly? I'm checking that Word document, which is my rewrite Word document, and I'm at 7,343 words. So 7k, it's really not that much. It's not even 10. So yeah, it's taken me a while to write 7,000 words, and I don't know, I'm still proud of it. I still think I did a good job. It's just been a little bit of a tough time. Everyone's been in life slumps all around me, and I have to. It has nothing to do with specifically writing. I think it was just anything. I couldn't do anything at all. But I don't want to try and give you an excuse because, I mean, everyone has a different process, and at the end of the day, the point of writing for me is that it's meant to be fun. And when it's not fun, I just don't do it. So regardless of how many words I have rewritten, I can tell you that I'm in the middle of chapter 4. And technically, I had originally thought I would just be fixing chapter 1 to 4, but I think it's become more evident that I need to take this fixing further into the story, and I have written bullet points of what I want to fix and change and rewrite for at least 5 chapters at the moment. I think maybe it will go further than that, if only because there is one character in particular that I originally had introduced quite early on in the story, in the 2nd or 3rd chapter I think, but now that I'm rewriting the story, I haven't introduced this character yet, and I need to figure out when to do so in a strategic moment so that it still, you know, portrays the same scene that I wanted to portray originally. I still need to write, I think, a couple more chapters at least. So since I'm in the middle of chapter 4, let's say 2.5 chapters needed until I'm mostly satisfied about my complete rewriting. But that's just for the chapters I plan on rewriting really, and I think for the rest of the story I'm gonna need to go in and do like a second edit just based off this rewriting because it might have changed a couple of things, and I also noted down some things that I just want to introduce more of while I'm working within the overall story basically. And for these changes, I just have like a little bit of a bullet to-do list basically of things that I think I want to change while I'm in the story in general. And they don't have to be for a certain chapter. They can be just for anything at all. So for instance, one of the things I had noted down is that when Olive goes to this rush party, this sorority slash fraternity party, because I think it's more of a combined party, like a mixer, originally there's no theme to it, but I just thought it would be really fun to give it a theme, so I did exactly that, and that was one of my bullet points. Another one that I had in there was that I really wanted to name the university something because I didn't have a name for it. It's very, very loosely based off my research on a couple of big American universities, including in Boston, just because I wanted really this idea of having a big campus, like a place where all the students live and everything, and there's like a coffee place here and just, you know, a bunch of restaurants and all that. So that's kind of my loose idea, but I myself have never been to Boston and I've never been to any of those campuses in the US. So I am mostly going to be influenced by what I have lived in Europe, and it might be completely different. So my point was that it has to be a fake university. It has to become something completely different and be a hybrid of my research and my experience, which is why I wanted to give it a name. So I ended up deciding to name it Cordel just because I like that name and it sounds like, you know, an old French name that would have been taken on into an American university, which I think can definitely happen. And also, I think I had used it for like a story I wrote a really, really long time ago when I was younger. I think one of my old, never finished drafts of a story had a city named Cordel in it, and I was just like, I want to name my university that. I don't really have much more that I can tell you about without giving you spoilers, but it included more things like, for instance, there's a character that she is meant to have a strong relationship with, but just didn't have enough scenes to establish that, so I really wanted to remediate that during my new edit of the manuscript, so things like that really. I also went through a phase of looking at real life interrogations in interview rooms, you know, whenever there was like a murder suspect or just a suspect of a crime in general. So I looked these up on YouTube. There's plenty of them that you can actually watch, and sometimes there are some with commentary from a person explaining the psychology behind a person's behavior or like nonverbal language and things like that. So I watched a couple of these just to try and establish how I wanted my first chapter to go, and the scene where she's getting interrogated by these two cops to go down. So if I were to analyze myself and the reasons behind my writing slump, there's probably a couple of things that went down during this long period of 5 months that just happened for me not to want to write anything. But I can tell you what I did to actually spark that creativity again. And recently that has included starting a new project, actually. That's something that I had heard someone else say, I think from another authortube channel probably, or booktuber channel, I'm not sure. Someone who mentioned that their way of making sure that they continued writing and they were able to edit their first draft really well and go into those like strong edits and not just line edits. The way that they did that was it would only work for them if they had another project that they were currently starting / writing the first draft of. Just because that's the fun part for them. And so they were like, if I'm gonna do the harder part, I need to have another project where I'm doing the fun part, just so I have a balance between the two. Otherwise it becomes this constant struggle of my whole writing life is just editing, and you have to take some time to do it, and you realize, well, maybe it's not fun, maybe it's not the part that you really enjoy, but it is a big part of writing and it takes a while. So while you're doing that, that becomes writing. It becomes what you think of as writing. And so when you do that, and if you don't enjoy it, it just becomes a thing where you're like, I don't want to do that, so I don't like writing anymore, so I'm not going to write anything anymore. Even though if you were actually writing just the first draft of something and doing what you consider to be that fun part, then you would still understand, wait, that's just a necessary process and I can do both. So I decided to try and do that, and I'm not entirely sure how well this worked for me. I did actually start a new project and have been really enjoying writing it, and it has sparked the fun and creativity of it as well again. But I think while I was writing it, I just wasn't editing any more than I was before, so it wasn't actually enticing me to edit any more than that. I don't know yet when I'll be talking about the other project. I think maybe if I get further into it and if I've written enough of it that I feel like there is really something there, then I will likely talk about it on this channel as well. For now though, I'm just gonna keep it secret. So another thing that I tried to force myself back into this creative mode was actually I attended this summit online by this guy, David Wallace, I think it is. I will put his name there, his handle or whatever down in the description, a link to the summit and everything in the description so that you have the info. But basically it was a summit on how to find your audience, how to find your readers. During this summit, I feel like it sparked my creativity to write again. It worked, it definitely did, because I have opened my document again and I started writing more, and yeah, so I'd say that definitely helped. And I think part of it is just feeling a little bit more like I was part of a community of writers and authors and people who were into that craft. Because before that, I have to admit, like, I don't have any friends who write. None of my friends write, as far as I know. They may just have been hiding it. And I did take part in this writing group that started on Discord at some point, but I think everyone's lives have really been taking over and no one's been very active on it recently, so it's been a little bit silent. And I think for that reason I was like, oh, I'm not talking to any other writers, and it's really hard to do this alone and to just have no one who understands what I'm doing. And yeah, maybe for that reason it was really good to feel again like I was surrounded by other people who were doing the same shit as I was doing. And when I went to the summit, I'd say I learned 3 things. The first thing is that it's really, really good and important to keep track of the positive comments you get on your writing. And that's something that had never really occurred to me, but I did love when I sent some samples to friends or to people in the writing group when their response was really, really positive. And I was like, this is helping my confidence massively, because as someone whose first language is not English, I was finding it extremely hard and terrifying to share any of my writing and to feel like anything that I was writing was good enough to share. I was really worried that my prose was not good enough, and I think I am working on that regardless. Whether it's good enough or not, I still think that it's good to actually improve on it. But yeah, I thought it was really scary, and when I first shared some bits and realized people liked it and thought it was well written, it was so nice and helped me so much. But one of the authors that talked during this summit was saying basically how he keeps tabs of all those comments that he gets on his writing, anything positive, and he puts it on, I think, a corkboard or something like that behind his screen so that he can look at it every day while he sits down to write. I haven't done that yet, but I did decide to take screenshots of whatever I got, or whenever I send a chapter to my friends and stuff and they generally liked something, and just I took screen grabs and just put them in one folder that I called Happy Thoughts. I know that sounds cheesy, but I just thought it was cute. So that's what I've been doing so far, and I think maybe because I'm moving flats, when I have moved and if there is space for me to do that, I might do what he's doing and have a little corkboard behind my screen or something so that I can pen these. Just because I think it is really, really good for your confidence and as a writer, just to help with your creativity, to know that people actually enjoy what you do. I think the point is not to write just for yourself, although that can be a really good thing too, but to also know that whatever you do is helping others or making them feel happy or thinking that it's fun and enjoyable. So yeah, I do think that's a good thing to do. The second thing that I learned was actually that it seems to be the main way to get an audience and to get people to read your book, whether you are self-published or traditionally published, whether you want to go down one route or the other, is really to have a newsletter. Apparently that's what everyone is saying, and I don't know how true that is. I feel like maybe it is, but also maybe it's not when you haven't got a book out yet. The advice on when to start seems to differ, but the main point was really that, like, yeah, agents and editors in general, they like it if you do already have an audience and if you have people willing to read you, because it'll help you massively and it'll help them not having to pay for a lot of PR and everything. So if I want to go down the traditional route, it's still a good idea to have a newsletter. If I want to go down the self-publishing route, it's an extremely important idea to have a newsletter. That's my understanding of it. However, as I've said, I am moving flats. I also have this booktube / now perhaps authortube channel, and I am very busy with a bunch of things, including work and all that, and I just felt like starting a newsletter right now seems like a lot of work, and I wouldn't want to do it with just no idea what I'm going to write in it, no idea how to do this. So I'm probably just going to research it quite a lot before I make my decision and do one, and it's just not going to happen immediately. Maybe I'm even going to wait until I'm finished with what I will consider to be my final edit of my book, for it to be completely finished and written and wrapped up, in order for me to start a newsletter, just because then I'll have something that I can, prepare people for and tell them about in a way that feels a lot more finalized and ready. And then I also realized the third thing basically that I learned, which is that I do have this platform. It's not big, there's like 400 of you or something, and it's really nice just to have a bunch of people who still do care about what I'm saying. And I think a lot of people started following me for book reviews and vlogs, so maybe it's not the right way to do this, but I did feel like it would be a bit of a waste of time if I were to just start a newsletter when I already have a platform where I'm pretty much doing the same thing, which is talk to people and try and form a community and just tell them about stuff, including my book and my writing. So I think the third thing that I learned is pretty much that I'm going to try and transform this channel a little bit. Not to become just a purely writing authortube channel, but to be a little bit more hybrid and have a little bit less of just the book content and a little bit more of my writing content. I think I want to balance it out, see where it goes, see whether that works for you guys, see whether you enjoy it. If you don't, I'm very sorry. It's just me experimenting, and I feel like experimenting at the beginning is better than when you've already got a huge platform and people are like, wow, I'm really not interested in that, so I'm gonna try to do this now. I think, yeah, in general, I'd like for this to happen just because it's gonna be a good outlet for me. It's gonna be good for me to learn to talk more about my book and my writing. And also it might help me find other people like me, other people who share the same interest, who maybe are writing a book that is in the same genre or something, I don't know. Just establishing this sense of community, because I think it helps a lot with the writing. Being part of a community, feeling like other people are going through the same struggles as you just help massively with being creative. So yeah, I think I'm gonna try and continue editing some bits that I have written recently, maybe take you with me for that, and then we'll end this video on that. Okay, so I've now had a little bit of a writing session. I didn't actually write that much in terms of the amount of words that I wrote, but I did edit a whole passage that was very draft-like and needed a good look at it. And I also planned out what I want to do for the next couple of chapters, so I'm not completely in the dark about it, and I planned out a few more things to add to my general list and just things that I'm gonna want to change later on in further chapters and things like that. So I'm pretty happy with my work, to be fair. Like, I'm pretty happy with what I've done. It's not a whole lot to show for in terms of amount of words, but I feel like that's not always writing, and you can't always quantify it. You can't always say, I've written this many words. Sometimes you know you've done a lot of really important structural work to your novel, or you've done a lot of really important research for it, things like that, that you can't actually say, oh, I wrote 5k today, or things like that. So to give you an example of how you can't always quantify the work that you do when you work on a book, for instance, I've been struggling to figure out when to reintroduce a certain character and then introduce that character for the first time, but I had him originally much earlier in the novel, like in chapter 3 or something, in the first draft of it. And then because I moved when the novel starts, I really just didn't know where to introduce him anymore. He didn't work in the same spot. And so I was like, where do I put him when she meets him for the first time? I'm lost with this. And honestly, it was really stumping me. It was like a problem that I just couldn't see a solution to. And then right now, just doing a lot of work on planning and like seeing what the next chapters are going to be like, things like that, I think I finally figured it out. I finally figured out that actually I need to slightly change his role. And he's actually meant to be a doctor, and I think originally in the draft I had him as a doctor at the hospital in town where she goes to, and now I think it just makes a lot more sense for him to be a doctor on campus and part of the university, just because then it makes it easier for me to plan when she's gonna meet him and where. Otherwise it becomes super convoluted. I'm like, why would she go to the hospital now? Because I don't have a reason anymore, and if she just goes randomly, that makes no sense. If she meets him elsewhere, it just feels a little bit like a weird meet cute. I don't know, it just wasn't working anymore, and I think making him a campus doctor works so much better. So that's what I'm gonna do. So I'm probably gonna take a little break. I need to do some reading as well and make myself some dinner, things like that. And then once I'm done, I will maybe write a little bit more tonight. I feel like I'm in the mood for it now. This is the thing, it's like, it's motivational to start. Whenever I do start writing, I just wanna go on and I wanna continue again. So I think this is the part where I realize I need to force myself a little bit more. And whenever I feel like I'm in a writing slump, I need to just go for it anyway, try. Just at the very least try, because often it comes very naturally once I start. But other than that, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, do leave a like and a comment down below, because I always try to respond. But also, I would really love to know if you do enjoy this kind of content, because I think I'm going to try to do a lot more writing content on this channel and have a bit more of a hybrid channel between BookTube and AuthorTube. So if you like that kind of stuff, it would be really helpful for me to know. And yeah, consider subscribing, ring that bell, all that jazz, and I will see you guys in the next one.